All right, so here we are back with another section. This time around, what we're going to be doing is taking a look at how we can program in the AltFire of our gun. It's going to be relatively close to the fire, but we put this in its own little separate category because we're going to be relying on states a little bit heavier this time for managing our animation. Mr. Logan, would you like to tell us a little bit about the actual AltFire itself?
Okay, in AltFire we're going to have it where you have to hold the AltFire button down and it will continue to fire as you have the button held down. Also, when you first hit AltFire, it's going to have to wait for the deflector shields to open.
Okay, so we've got this animation stuff. But what about the actual projectiles itself? Are we shooting out one at a time or multiple?
We're actually going to spawn 4 at a time and spawn them in a diamond pattern.
Ooh, diamond pattern. 4 at a time. Interesting. Sounds like that could be painful.
Not really.
Okay. We could make it painful. So first thing we're going to do is come over here. Of course, we're back up underneath 3D Buzz classes. We'll open up our Viper UC and we will continue adding code in here. You probably guessed it. The very first thing that we're going to need to add is going to be some more default properties. We've only got 2 that we need to add at this point, and that's going to be our Alt Projectile class and our AltFire sound. So we can just come up and find our actual projectile class and copy it and paste. And I'll just put Alt in front of this. And this time we're going to actually be pulling from outside of our package. So I'm going to need to come in here and specify the package we're going to be pulling from. So it's going to be botpack. See, botpack dot plasmasphere. Okay, just making sure nothing was typed wrong there. Of course, by the way, guys, it's about 4 o'clock in the morning, so my typing skills are slowing down incredibly. Next thing we're going to need to do is come on down here to the fire sound. Just kidding. Control Copy and paste that. And again, this is also going to be Alt. So AltFire sound and sound. Let's go ahead and change. It's going to be Unreal Share .asmd .tazeralt fire. Okay, Logan, did all my spelling look correct as I was yakking and typing and sleeping all at the same time?
Yes.
Okay, that's a good thing. Now let's go ahead and go back to the top. If you remember back in the firing section, what we did is we wrote one function and one state. Our function was the fire function, and our state was the normal fire state, which is, of course, any name that we wanted to assign. Now what we're going to do is we're going to come back in here and we're going to create a new function, and this function is going to be called AltFire. Now, tell us about AltFire.
AltFire will be called when you hit the AltFire button.
And so, in other words, it is a built-in...
Right, this has to be named AltFire.
Okay, so set up just like above, except it's got the word Alt in there. And we will go ahead and open curly brace, close curly brace. And we've got some states. I'm going to come down here and just put in the basic structure of my states, just kind of, getting things ready to go. This time around, we've got 2 states that we're going to add. We're going to add one state that's alt firing and one state that's closing. So let's go ahead and put them in there. So we've got the first state, and it's alt firing, like such. And we'll go ahead and open and close. And in the next state is going to be closing. And again, opening and closing. So it's going to be real easy to see what's happening once I go ahead and lay just a little bit of code in place. You'll see how these guys are interacting with one another. So let's go ahead and come up here for firing. And in the actual AltFire function, we're not going to do all the same tons of stuff we did up here in the fire function earlier. The reason is it's really important in this case for us to handle our animation. We've got deflector shields that need to deploy. They need to open up. We've got our barrel that needs to spin up, and that needs to happen all in the spin-up animation cycle. And then we go into the actual AltFire where we'll be going through basically this stuff right here. So for that to occur, in the AltFire section, what I want to do is simply go in here and tell it to, actually we'll just tab on over. We'll go ahead and tell it to play the anim. So play animation, and we're going to tell it the animation it's going to play is going to be SP up. If you remember, up above we've got an exec line for that particular animation sequence. And again, 0.5, and our tweening, 0.05. Okay? So next thing, so now we're starting to play the spin-up animation, and what we want to do next is tell it to go to a state. So we're going to say go to state. And we're going to tell it to go to state alt firing. Okay? The reason is we've got to let this animation here finish, and once it's finished, its first time, in other words, it's run spin up one time, then we need to progress into the actual AltFire animation clip or cycle, and that's when we actually need to take care of decrementing our ammo if we have ammo, etc., etc. So that brings us AltFiring. Let's go ahead and make sure we throw a little semicolon in there so we don't get ourselves in trouble. Now we'll go ahead and come down here to our AltFiring state, and in the AltFiring state, this time, as opposed to doing a begin, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to start this one off with a function that is called animEnd. Would you like Mr. Logan to tell him a little bit about this?
Okay, so function, that's one of the reasons we're going to state AltFiring is we only want this animEnd function to happen, all the stuff to happen, only when we're specified that we're in AltFiring. So okay, we've used go to state, we've jumped to AltFiring. Now, this function animEnd gets called whenever the current animation is done playing.
Which is exactly what we're going to need. The spin up goes through its cycle, and when it's done, then it triggers this where we can actually start discharging projectiles.
Right.
Okay, so for putting all of our stuff in here, think it's going to be too big of a headache if we just come up here and copy?
Nope, that would speed stuff up.
So we'll just, all I'm doing is I'm coming back to my fire function, and I'm copying everything from in there. And I'm just going to walk on down here.
And move that to animEnd.
Into our animEnd function, and we will just simply paste.
And
okay, and now, okay, Logan, you're pointing to this over here, but
no, you want to kill the one below it.
Don't we want to close our function off?
Oh, I see how you copied that now.
Yeah, he's just, it's just with this guy the way he is, it's just nothing's actually indented over at the moment. So we could come over here and just start indenting like such. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it'll be easier to see now.
Okay. Sorry about the pause. You just kind of confused me for a second when...
just coding preferences and confused each other.
Yeah. So cruising on down, I'm just laying everything out now so it's real easy to see. And I think we're almost there, just a little bit more. Okay. And
except that we're probably not going to go to normal fire here.
Oh no. I'm going to start back up here and start going through what we do.
We're going to revamp this whole code.
Yeah, because the first thing we've got right now is we're just telling it to see if we have ammo and go for it. But first of all, we probably need to check something like if we're actually in a AltFire state. So what I want to do is pull this back, and you'll probably see why in just a second. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say if p dot b AltFire, and hang on, I'll assign b in just a second, equals 1, like such. And right above that, also we'll go ahead and come in here and put our open. Right above that, I'm going to come in here and say P equals pawn owner.
So we could probably go ahead and kill the one that happens lower in the code.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna start stripping all that stuff out in just a minute. So just to make this a little bit nicer, like such. And I'm going to cruise down here towards the bottom and grab the closing of that and go like such. Okay, so basically now we're starting out, we're grabbing who we are, putting it into P, or who the person is firing the gun, and now by checking to see if the player is holding the AltFire button down, if that's equal to true, then we can come in here and we can check to see if we can actually use, and in this case, since we're going to be shooting out 4 of these, if we can use 4 of these ammos, and if the answer is true, then we're going to start actually taking care of firing the weapon. So far, so good?
Yep.
So in here, let's see, what are we going to keep? We'll do that. Okay, same thing as above. B pointing is true. We'll worry about, go ahead and same thing, getting our start, which is going to be our base for where we're going to spawn projectiles from. Let's come down here and get rid of our setting our P right there. We need our adjusted aim. We need to use get axes. All that still counts. We still need to have our weapon light. That's still important. Now our start right now, let's see, it's still going to be exactly the same. The only thing that's going to be a big difference right now is our spawning stuff. So let's go ahead and see how things are going to be spawned this time around. Instead of it actually spawning the projectile class, it's going to be the alt projectile class so that we spawn the proper thing. And then again, no owner, no tag, and we're going to do start. And this time we're going to add and subtract a little left, right, up, and down, right?
Right, so instead of start being like you saw before, this projectile spawn roughly centered on the gun's barrel. Instead, we're going to spawn 4 around the barrel.
So I'm just going to come in here and do like that. And we'll just say minus.
The first one, move it up a little. The second one, move it down a little. The third one, move it to the right or left. And the fourth one,
the other direction.
The other one.
Okay, so that looks pretty good to you? So we're ready to come on down here now to do a little play animation. Did we want to have player shake in this, or?
We wouldn't have to. It'd probably be a little bit more distracting because it's so often.
So let's just take this and we'll just take that out. Of course, if,
matter of personal preference. If you want it there, you can just leave it.
Absolutely. So then from there, let's go ahead and come down. We'll leave the recoil in there, and let's see, player sound. This time we need to do Alt. So we've got AltFire in there. And then that basically brings us down to being ready to play our animation. So this time around, our play anim is going to be AFire. If you remember, that was the actual sequence name that we gave it way on back. Okay? So its timing on this one is going to be a little different. It's going to be 0.6, and tweening still going to be 0.05. And now, that is going to, let's take this go to state. We're going to cut this out right here. So this is what is going to happen if we have ammo to actually fire, okay? If we don't have ammo to fire, or we've just let go of the button, we need to go through the spin down.
Right.
So for that, what we'll do is we'll just simply say, outside of the if, I'll say else. Okay, so that means somehow in there we didn't satisfy being able to take the ammo away. I'll go ahead and paste that go to state, and this time around, what I want to do is I want to go to state closing. And from inside closing, this is where we'll actually be putting our deflector shields back together, and we'll be doing the spin down thing. And from there, that's going to be it for that. So we could, let's see, just to keep this real clean looking, I'll just do an open and a close. And we have another else, or another if that we're tied in up here with, which is somewhere down in here. I guess I never actually put that guy's.
No, you didn't. So now you did.
Now we've got him. Else, and I'm going to copy the same thing here, and then I'll explain what I'm doing. So let's just paste this in and move that back, and we'll move that back as well. So what's happening here is we've got 2 checks going on. First, is the player that has this gun that's firing it, does he have the button pushed down? If the answer is no, then we're not going to play everything that's inside these curly braces. We'll skip all the way down here. We'll hit the else, which means, all right, we're not doing A, so let's do B. And in this case, B equals go to state closing. So since you're no longer holding the AltFire button down, we now need to go ahead and do the spin down animation cycle, right?
Right.
Okay, and if we are still holding the button down, that's cool. Now we're just simply going to come into this section here and see if we can take 4 ammo or 4 projectiles away from this guy. And if the answer is yes, that's cool. We'll do everything that's inside here. And once we get down here, we'll play our animation. And once we hit the play anim, we're still inside our alt firing state, which is fine. So this function's still sitting there waiting to be triggered when the animation comes to stop again, okay, which will begin the cycle all over again. But if we do not have 4 projectiles to take away, then we'll come down, we'll skip all the way down to here, we'll hit the else, and we'll simply, again, go to state closing. That's why you see 2 different go to state closings. Okay?
Exactly.
Okay. Anything you want to add to that?
Not really. That was it.
Okay. So then for the closing state, this guy here, we're just going to wrap things up by coming in here, and this one will have a begin.
Yes, also notice the alt firing state did not have a begin. We did not necessarily want to do anything when the state was first entered. We wanted to let that anim end function trigger stuff.
That's right.
Whereas here, state closing, immediately when we hit state closing, we want to do some stuff. In this case, play the spin down animation.
0.5 and 0.05. Semicolon. Typing is getting slower as it gets later. Finish. anim, so another latent function. So we're just going to kind of enter into a state where we're going to be waiting, and then finally finish. And that's just going to kind of clean things up, make sure that we're not still firing if we get into this state right here, and everything's nice and cool. So with that, did you see any typos I made?
Not really.
A lot of stuff going on in here. And
right.
So looks good to me. So basically, let me give you a quick recap on what I did. Came in here, opened up viper.uc file again, came down to my default properties section and added 2 new things. I added an all projectiles class, and I changed it from pchunk. We're no longer looking inside our own package. We're looking outside of it into the bot pack package, and we're grabbing the plasma sphere as our projectile. And then I simply copied the fire sound line, pasted it, and changed it to AltFire sound, another default property you can find with weapons. And I'm telling you that the sound we're going to use with it is located in that package and with that particular gun, that gun's sound anyways. And so with that in place, then what I did is I went up above and I went ahead and defined 1 function in 2 states. The first function was AltFire, and again, it's another built-in function that gets automatic. That's the function that gets called when you do AltFire. We could not have called it AltFire 2 or something like that. We had to have an AltFire function for us to actually go into. Then the next thing I did is I went ahead and laid out 2 new states. I did an alt-firing state, and I did a closing state. And the way that the whole thing works, from a quick overview, is as soon as we come into the AltFire, first thing that we do is we play the animation spin up, okay, and that is where the deflector shields come out, spread apart as the barrel begins to spin up. We set our timing, we set our tweening, and then we simply said go to state AltFire. So that's all his job is to do. Once we came down to AltFire, we did not have a begin section. We did not have any code that we triggered to go into. We only have a function in this particular state, and it's the animEnd function. It's a very particular function that gets triggered when an animation comes to an end. In other words, it stops. When the spin up animation does hit an end, this gets triggered. When it gets triggered, it runs everything inside here, which all I did is I went back up above, copied the original fire function, because we're basically doing the exact same thing, and then pasted it down here, and then started doing some modifications. First thing that we had to take into consideration was, is the player still holding down the AltFire? In other words, I can tap the AltFire button extremely fast, and if I do, the spin up will occur all the way through, but then he's going to need to spin down if we're not still holding it down to actually go into the AltFire firing state. So, or we don't want to call it state. That could be misleading. I'm saying it in a different sense, but into the alt-firing world of actually occurring. So, even though that sounds kind of funny too. So, anyways, so that's the first thing we're doing, is we're simply checking to see, is he still holding that button down? If the answer is yes, then we're like, okay, now let's go ahead and check if we can use 4 projectiles. If we can, go through the routine as before to spawn our light, to figure out where the actual projectile is going to be at. And then the big thing we did different, we spawned 4 projectiles, and it's of alt projectile class. We used what is set in that default property, and that again was set below as the plasma sphere. And this time what we did is we used start, and we offsetted it up, down, left, and right, and just gave it some additional adjustments in there. Excuse me, thank you for seeing that. I did not change that guy over to a Y. Logan actually just pointed over my shoulder, and that was a slick catch there. So we did actually have a bug in this. So again, it's just doing an offset. All this is done, leaving these numbers exactly the same, has given us a nice little diamond shape. You could go in here and take these and adjust them to get a different diamond size if you'd like as well. And if you remember, adjust it. Aim just controls which way our projectile is pointing. And then from there, we said player animations. We took all of the shaking stuff out. We still have the recoil. We play our AltFire sound. And then we simply say, okay, do the AltFire, and we don't go to no state. That's it. Why? Because at the moment, we're actually in the AltFiring state. So after we play this animation, now we're just letting Unreal take care of the rest. The animation's going to play. When it gets done, it will simply come back in here and trigger again the animEnd function, which will then make sure we're still holding down the fire, that we still have ammo, and we'll go back through the routine. And this is what I was talking about earlier, way earlier when we was in the animation section, and that is with the AltFire, it's going to continue going through, and it's going to look like it's just doing a rapid spin. Okay? So with that out of the way, let's go now look at the 2 else's again real fast in summary, or in summing up, and that is, if we don't have enough ammo, we just hit this else and we go to closing so that we can basically spin down or use the spin down cycle, put our deflector shields back up. And if the player is no longer holding the AltFire down, again, he also spins down by going to the closing state. Closing state has a begin, so in other words, when we enter this state, boom, we immediately execute some code. We come in, we immediately play the spin down cycle. Once we play that, we use the latent function finish anim, what is just going to kind of hold things up until the animation that we just played above completes. Once it actually completes, then we're free to move forward, which is with finish. And finish, as you know from earlier, just make sure that the button's still not being held down, etc., etc. It just really releases the state of the weapon if we're not still trying to fire. And that's it.
That's it.
Was that okay, Logan? Just said? Kind of makes sense, I guess?
Yes, it does, actually. That was good.
Oh, well, thank you. For after 4 a.m. now, boy, woo, we're pushing it good. So I guess I'm getting my second win finally. It just took forever to get here. So this is our finished UC file right here. And it is a simple one. Okay, some of the ones available that you can study inside of Unreal Tournament are quite large. Let's go ahead, file, let's save this out now. We can close it. Let's go ahead and come back over here to our command prompt, and as long as I didn't make any bad mistakes in there, let's run umake again and let it go through and put all this together for us. And we do have an error this time around, and the error is somewhere. I'm hunting for what the problem is.
You have to scroll over to find it.
Yeah, is it going to? Oh, good. The other thing up above stopped. So
you just missed a closing brace somewhere.
Yep. So
curly brace.
So let's go ahead.
It could not load up that level because that level is dependent on that 3D Buzz package.
Exactly. So this is a very good thing to show, actually, because most of our users out there that have never done anything like this before are probably going to run into problems where they leave a brace off, where they leave a semicolon off, etc. So let's see if we can find this thing quickly. So open, close. That's all good. So 1, 2, 3. Up. Close function. All right. Do you see it?
Not yet. Actually, it gave a line number. Go back to the compiler. I think it was 171.
So 171. So edit. Go to 171. Tell it OK. And so we're way down here. And, yeah, it was looking in the right place. So close, close. Open, open. Big if, that if. Close.
Could you be missing? Let's see. Scroll down a little bit more.
Down, open. Kind of wouldn't hurt to have that one in there as well, you know. This was, again, a good example.
This happens a lot when you're programming, and being able to track this down is a good thing.
Absolutely. So in this case, what happened is I came down here to the else, and I did not have an opening, but I did have a closing, which kind of freaked it out.
Yeah, and I didn't catch that because I don't put braces there when I program.
When I have, he does his afterwards, which is very common. This is just the way I do it when I'm actually teaching students with programming. Plus, when I generally do only a one-line thing, you won't find me doing curly braces at all. Yeah, exactly. So I think that's what happened at that point. So let's go ahead and save again. And this time, let's close it, come back over here, and let's go back to it. Hey, looks good. And, yep, let's run it. And let's fire. And let's see what we get. Go ahead and come on over. And let's grab our gun. And, hey, seeing a spin up. Looks pretty good. So now let's just hold it down. And we are now firing.
It's just kind of dragging down our recording.
And, yeah, it is kind of dragging down our recording to actually do this right now. But the cool thing is you can actually see that it did it. And I just ran out of ammo. So, anyways, that's what we wanted to demonstrate.
Exactly.
I think that does a decent job. So let's go ahead and come in here and exit out of this guy. And that finishes off all of our program. Wow. Whew. Anything else you want to add to this, Logan?
Not really. That's it for programming.
Okay, guys, so that concludes the section on alt firing, and at the same time, it also concludes the section on our viper.uc file. So it's now done. Package is complete. That's it. So thank you guys very much, and that ends this lesson.